All right, guys, Quinn with 74 Weld here to do another tech segment, I guess, and talk about some race stuff. Given that King of the Hammers is right around the corner, we figured we'd throw out a video on all the different race options there are, and there are so many different configurations that we've done over the years. We'll dive into some of the details on each platform, but in front of me, what I've got is 4 different uprights here. We've probably built, how many, like 30? I don't know. We've probably done 30 vehicles worth of portals to date in the race stuff. Everything from trophy trucks to Ultra 4s to solid axle based around race stuff. What we'll do is talk about some of the differences on mounting pivots, talk about how we mitigate different loads in these applications, and I think I'll start with the one right in front of me because it's so funky, and then I get to get it off the table and then bring something else up to talk about the more important thing to me, which is how is our unit bearing different than everyone else on the market or every other race portal that's been built? And why did we build everything around a unit bearing? And then touch on, I still to this day don't believe that most people understand how our unit bearing system works and why we filed patents on this, why we have a physical patent on it, and then more importantly, like, because you can go, if you just Google search 74 Weld portal patent or something, I don't know, it'll pop up and you can actually see what our application was, what the process was. So I'll dive through, I'm going to go into detail on that, but first we'll start with this funky monstrosity in front of me, which was a rear application 4-gear portal on Lauren Healy's independent car. This actually started as a 7-inch thick block of 7075 aluminum. Super funky pivot stuff. But the cool thing about this, and the reason I would bring it up, is to show like we have done and can do all different types of special applications around our race stuff. Every race upright is typically designed by someone else and then given to us. So we will work directly with builders of trophy trucks and Ultra 4s. What we typically request is points in space of, hey, here's our portal, cut the knuckle off, tell us what you want your geometry to be, give us the points in space. We design the upright in some circumstances for all the builders that we have relationships with. We let them design the upright, but whether we're designing it or they are, effectively the vehicle builder is designing the geometry and then we'll turn it into a chunk of aluminum like this. So you had a trailing arm that came off here, a connecting link, kind of like a razor, I guess, another toe connecting link to be able to adjust toe, and then an upper arm on this. So very funky, super cool, and this car is still being campaigned at KOH. I think it should be there in a couple weeks, but I'm going to get this off the table because we're going to talk mostly about front stuff. This here is a new upright for a 4600 Bronco, and this runs a vertical bolt, or this will run a horizontal uniball. Both the upper and the lower uniball are going to be mounted horizontal. You can mount either vertical uniball or horizontal uniball. Why would you choose one versus the other? Typically, on all 4-wheel drives, the limiting factor on everything is always going to be the CV. You're never going to you're not really, you'll never get unlimited travel out of a front end because the CV can only go to, you know, a certain angle, and you'll always end up maxing that out, and that's what, you know, the real constraint on a four-wheel drive is going to be that final drive unit of the CV. So if you mount your CV, or sorry, if you're going to mount your pivots for a horizontal uniball, you essentially get unlimited steering, and you are going to be limited by the uniball in both the droop and full compression. And so if you want a little bit more steering, this is the way you get it. And because of the way CVs work, and you're trying to stay within the constraints of both wheel travel and turning, you end up with compound angles. You can sacrifice wheel travel to get more steering. Some guys that's important for. So this was set up like that. They wanted lots of steering. We're okay limiting travel, no problem. Then you get into this heavy thing. So this upright is running vertical uniballs, top and bottom, and the limiting factor on steering is going to be how much misalignment you can get out of that uniball, turning lock to lock. This essentially, the uniball will not bind full droop, full compression. The uniball is never going to bind in that circumstance. It will bind, you'll run out of travel in turning. And so if you want a little bit more travel and you're okay limiting steering, this is a pretty common setup on trophy trucks because a trophy truck just doesn't get a ton of steering. Ultra 4s are always typically going to get more steering than a trophy truck because when you're in rocks, like, steering is very critical. A totally different style of upright. This is for a new trophy truck that will be rolling out in 26. We've done these several times in the past. We did a Geyser, actually the Geyser trophy truck that Robbie Gordon has raced several times. I think it finished 4th at the Baja 1000. That is a horizontal uniball on the lower arm and a vertical uniball on the upper arm. This touches on a different thing, which is, you know, which one is better and why would you mount a horizontal or a vertical uniball on the lower and a horizontal uniball on the upper. That really comes down to load, well, again, builder preference, but the factor there is load on the uniball. So a uniball is rated axial load rating, both static and dynamic, and then radial load rating, static and dynamic. And a uniball will have a higher radial load rating in static and dynamic than it does axial. Think of it as radial is trying to push the ball straight through the race. Axial is trying to rip it out. It takes more force to push it through than rip it out. And why builders do either one, talk to the builder. But it really comes down to, I guess, builder preference, but we've done them all different ways. And I guess if you're going to go with a horizontal uniball, I have to think about all these terms before I say them because I don't want to get them wrong. If you're doing a horizontal uniball up here, like this style, a lot of people have this thought in their head that they go, oh, that's a weak setup because it's not double shear. I've gotten in arguments online over the years on double shear versus single shear on an upper pivot like this. I can tell you that we have been building uprights like this for guys for 5 years. Jason Shear's car is set up just like this. Actually, shear is horizontal uniball lower, horizontal uniball upper, because he wants to maximize steering. But Geyser truck, that twin engine Geyser that Robbie Gordon races, is set up identical to this upright, different geometry, but the uniball orientation is the same as this. And how do we not have any issue ever with this top uniball being in single shear? That comes down to how we design this piece. So this is a part that we make here in-house, and the design came because, let's see, this was 9 years ago. Cody Wagner, in his original, I think it was an Armada car at the time, yeah. Cody Wagner's old race car, when he first designed it, 2-gear portal, still is today. And that car would bend bolts at some point because it comes down to design. So when you're thinking single shear versus double shear, there's more to consider because it really comes down to how is that shear load carried. So if this was a flat surface, let me rotate it. If this here was just a flat surface and you had your misalignment sit on top and just a bolt go through, you'd have a big bending moment on that bolt. And yes, that bolt would fail on you. And Cody bent bolts, and then we came back and said, okay, we can improve on this. And so we came up with this design, which essentially is a thread, a shoulder, another shoulder, the misalignment, and then here's where your uniball would sit. So the reason that this is single shear but never a concern for the bolt to fail is because in this application, the bolt sees virtually no load. And the way that we do that is this thread, a male thread here, we have a female thread in that part, and you'll probably be able to see this when I start threading it in. That thread is fairly loose. It doesn't really matter too much. The reason we have the thread there is so that we can register this in, and it gets down here and it starts to get snug, and there is virtually no play in this. Now what happens is we will tighten this down. Now that shoulder that I showed you, that like inch long shoulder, that registers into the upright. The bolt now just holds everything together, and so when you slip a uniball on, the shear load on this whole piece is carried by the upright. The shear is not put on the bolt. So crank this down, slide your uniball on, think of the bolt as just holding the assembly together. We've run this same setup in, well, 4600, Shear's car, Robbie's trophy truck, a new trophy truck that's two new trophy trucks that are being built right now. We've had very good luck with this design. I guess the point of some of this is just to say, like, we've seen it all, we've done it all. Is one better than the other? It depends on who you're talking to, and it really depends on what is your goal for the platform. So are you trying to get as much steering as you want? Go with a design like this. Are you concerned about uniball loads on the upper arm? Because in a four-wheel drive application, a lot of torque is transferred to that upper arm. This would technically be a stronger uniball configuration if that's what you're, if you're talking about torque loads put through dive in a front suspension, this would be a better way to handle that. If you're set on double shear and you're concerned about travel and not as much about steering, you'd go this way. On every race application you see, we basically make a very similar setup on all the arms. It's nice and thick. We do 17-4 heat-treated inserts in everything. Pretty stout stuff. It really comes down to builder preference on a lot of this stuff. What I will touch base on, I'll leave some of this. Yeah, I'll pull the 4600 stuff down and bring this up, which is, let's talk about the unit bearing on our setup. And I've talked about this in other videos, but we're going to do it again because we still get a lot of questions on this, and I see comments online which are misinformed. So we're going to set some stuff here. If you took our gear out of the assembly and you put this upright on and you had your wheel out here, all of your load is going to be placed on this portal box. You're most likely going to break this box. Now, all of our uprights are made out of 70-75. All of our portal boxes have always been made out of 60-61. And yes, I agree 100%. If you didn't put gears in our setup and you just ran this as a two-wheel drive on a trophy truck, you're for sure going to break this box, because putting a big bending moment on a piece of 60-61 like this, it's probably going to lead to failure. So let's talk about what our design is, how it's different than everything else out there, and how it actually works. To do that, let's assume it kind of floats. Well, we'll take this off. Okay, so we have a Spider Trax unit bearing. That is I think it's like 2 3/8 56 spline. Massive hole in that. The unit bearing just bolts onto the box. That does create a bending moment there. But what we then do, we have a big, meaty, solid gear that slides in and locks in place. Okay, so now you have a unit bearing that mounts to the box and a gear that slides into the unit bearing that's held on by a spindle nut on the end. This gear essentially is your spindle. Remember, this is not a spindle. This is the spindle. This is an upright. Sorry, everybody always gets those wrong online. So you have this assembly where you have a unit bearing bolted to a box and a gear that slides in, and everything is preloaded and held together in this. Now what we put, and this pertains to our patent, the upright bolts to the box, right? And we have a register here and it slides in. The important part on this upright is this stub right here. The race for the ball bearing sits on this surface right here, needle bearing. And the needle bearing itself, not ball bearing, the needle bearing slides inside of the gear. So when this upright mounts to this box, now you're tying the unit bearing into the box, held together with a gear that then registers onto this spud here. This carries the load. So when you put a bending moment here, you're trying to torque this. What's keeping that from being able to move is that the upright registers into it and is held on that needle bearing, and it ties everything together as a single cohesive unit. We flat out don't see failures on this kind of stuff. And originally, when we actually got into building race portals, I originally started to work with X-Track on this stuff, and My NDA with X-Track has long expired. This was 9.5 years ago. And we were going to build a portal around an X-Track gear set because it was a pretty proven design, still is to this day. And when we went down that road, it was essentially, the reason I didn't actually continue on that was because the gear set and bearing package from X-Track was just going to be what I felt was too expensive for the Ultra 4 market. Now, Ultra 4s in the last 10 years have become a lot more expensive, but at the time, I looked at it and said, I don't see anybody in Ultra 4 being able to spend $25,000 for one portal. And that's essentially what it was going to come out at. So I took a step back and said, okay, what if we could design it around a SpiderTrax unit bearing? Because at the time, it was very proven, still is to this day. Nobody has unit bearing failures in Ultra 4, period. And I mean, a testament to this, we have a trophy truck that we built a set of portals for. The very first 4-gear portal that we built 8 years ago? Yeah, 8 years ago. He is still on the exact same bearing package. He's on the same unit bearing. He's on the same gear set. He's got, I don't know, 30, 40 races. And
ripped his inserts out.
Ripped what inserts out? Oh, he was racing, that was a San Felipe 250 and lost a bolt on his lower A-arm. Damn near lost the whole A-arm off the car because I guess the nut on the bolt came out and the bolt backed halfway out. He's wadded that car at 100 miles an hour, broke the car in half. Still on the same unit bearings. I know because the SpiderTrax unit bearing that we get, we have to modify. And so nobody is going to, none of our customers are ever going to go out and just buy a replacement SpiderTrax unit bearing. We have to modify it for them. We've never replaced a unit bearing because it's worn out. So when you're talking about race tested and race proven, Mason is clearly race tested, race proven. They make a really badass product. We've done so many different applications, and this design of unit bearing to box, gear registering, and then upright registering into that, it's the same principle that we carry into all of our bolt-on stuff as well, because while our bolt-on is not one piece for the lower gear, our lower gear registers into it, and then our knuckle or upright registers into that lower gear. So when you stack those components together, they become that one cohesive unit. And knock on wood, almost 10 years into this stuff, we've never seen a box fail, period. And we still to this day get the, oh, it's a bad idea to mount a unit bearing to the end of a box. You're right. That's not what we do. We stack everything together. It becomes strong as a unit. You take one of those components out, it doesn't work. But as a cohesive unit, it's about as good of a package as we've seen. And if it's not breaking, don't change it. So with King of the Hammers right around the corner, any questions on our race stuff, throw them in the comments. I'll get them answered. You'll see 15, 20 cars on the lake bed.
22 to 24.
22 to 24 cars on the lake bed with this kind of stuff. All different configurations, different pivots, different geometry. If you're building a race car and you want to talk about portal stuff, we'd be happy to have that discussion. We share models with anyone that asks. The model that we give you essentially is a full working model. It doesn't have the internals in it. We take care of that for you. But to be able to play with different pivots, design your own geometry.
Gear ratio options.
Oh, gear ratio options. We have 2 gear ratio options, a 1.63 and a 1.45. And I'll talk about why we chose those gear ratios in a different video and what we might do next some other time. If I missed something on this, I probably did. I'll figure it out later. And throw some questions down there. Give me your prediction of who's going to win King of the Hammers in 2026. Throw it in the comments and make sure it's a Portal car. See you on the next one.